we'll get started with the Stickler. Yeah. Oh my gosh! Right.
Hello,
Hey,
Yvonne.
hey. Hi, Evie. Great to see you. Great to see
One
anyone
more saboteur, right?
who's tuning in. Yeah, indeed. So we've left last week's Restless, me, behind. And this week we are going to look at the Stickler, which is really interesting because it's not high for either of us. This was not something that showed up. This was really down near the bottom for me on my assessment, and I think for you also, Evie. So but it's an interesting one because this is definitely one I have rubbed shoulders with a number of times. So the Stickler is really about the perfectionist, that the person who needs everything to be just so. And the whole point is, that the Stickler gives no kind of area of error for itself in anything it does. So again, like all of the other characters that we're talking about here, there are obviously benefits, the underlying strengths of it. But when we are talking about the Stickler as an absolute saboteur, then we know that really what it's doing is damage. And so if you think about it, if the Stickler is constantly leaning on you and pressing into you, telling you everything has to be perfect, no, you can't send that out yet because you haven't done X, Y, Z. What really happens, and what I've seen happen many times, is that the person ends up not doing anything. Like procrastination becomes a massive block, but it also gives them a sense of not being enough. I'm just not enough. I'm not good. I can't get this right. I can't get this spot. As if everything has an absolute right way and one way of right way to it. That is, and again, and I'm smiling because I'm thinking of two people who I know quite well.
Actually, that's the reason why I'm smiling as well. Now I'm thinking of one very specific person.
When you kind of hone in on that, I'm just like, I can see how they get in their own way. These are two highly talented individuals, both of them actually highly creative. However, because they are also perfectionists, because that Stickler part of them is so high, their creativity just gets dumbed down. It gets squashed because no matter how brilliant the idea they have, it immediately no, it's not enough. It's not good enough. It's not, that's not different than what somebody else is doing, right?
I'm not following enough.
How are you seeing that, Evie?
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. It's like, I think the Stickler is the epitome of how one gets in their way.
Yes.
All the saboteurs are, hard on us, but the Stickler really gets on our way. I think when you have that high on your list, because you have the excuse of perfection, and that, of course, how are you going to show up if you're not perfect? And at the same time, it makes you a very hard person to be around because nobody else is perfect, clearly. So you become very critical. So it hurts a lot, your relationships. Yes. With yourself first and with others. So yeah, definitely not a very good saboteur to have around. This is like sticking back behind the curtain, really, really back.
Yes, right, way back there. And that's such an interesting point that you raised there, Evie, about the fact that, when you are in that state of being the Stickler, so being like the perfectionist of all perfectionists, it's not only about the harm that you're doing to yourself, but also the relationships around you. Because when somebody is kind of that driven to get everything kind of nutted and bolted down in a very specific way, there's very little anyone else can do to make that better, to make the situation better. Their input probably isn't welcome, because guess what? They're not perfectionists. So it's like, why are you even talking? You can't help me. I know what needs to be done. I'm just not getting there. And it creates such a big barrier towards people connecting with you, but also with you connecting with yourself, because that is like that pressure. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what that pressure's like. What does it feel like when everything you do is just not good enough? Or I need to spend another hour, another day, another week. I need to fine tune it. And I mean, it's how many times can you fine tune something? And and actually, in our world, sort of, and not just coaching, but if you're working for yourself, that is incredibly debilitating, because you're creating
Absolutely.
things to help people, but nobody ever gets to see it because it's never good enough, because you just keep working on it, right? So that's incredibly frustrating for you, but it also means that that gift and that talent and that skill that you have is being missed by other people, because you're withholding, and you're withholding because you have buried yourself into, it must be this way.
And you know,
um
the really sad thing about this is that at least most of the sticklers that I know or I have come across, they're extremely intelligent, and they could potentially show up in a very, very strong way, in a good way. But they are, as you say, hold themselves back and consider themselves not as intelligent, or if they dare to think that they are intelligent, they that shows up as a, like a little bit of arrogance as well, which
yeah,
again is damaging to their connections, their relations, and stuff like that. Because you see, at least the way that I have seen it as a person looking inwards for this particular saboteur, is that
yeah,
they just don't accept, as you say, anything less than perfect. So since none of us is perfect, that
we're in
expectation is
trouble.
like so like like damaging to yourself. I want to say ridiculous, but okay, I'm going to
Judge.
hold that back. But it is so damaging because like you don't really stop and see or hear anything that anyone has to offer, and the
Indeed,
possibility of that, because it can't possibly be perfect.
indeed.
So, and also when it comes to like doing things, the stickler needs to have all the information before
Yes,
they move anywhere, which means that again, how likely is that?
yeah,
How can we move forward expecting to have all the information? And it's
indeed.
not about like a 80% of the information. It's not about like 85% of the information. No, it's 100% of the
Yeah,
information.
yeah,
And of course,
yeah,
for people outside and not understanding this particular saboteur, what they see is just somebody making excuses over and over and over again against something that is very damaging for relationships.
yeah. So true. And I think some of those characteristics that, are not who, this is not who, if this is resonating with you in terms of being a perfectionist, and this is not about criticizing, this is about identifying these traits and these things that are really your perfectionist self being overplayed, being like really
Absolutely.
overplayed and becoming damaging. Because what people tend to see or experience is somebody who's highly critical, somebody who is incredibly self-reliant, like, I might as well just do it myself because you can't, you're not up to the job. And that is, not only is that demeaning for somebody else, but that also means that that person is creating less space for themselves, because I now have to do everything. So interestingly, one of the people that I was thinking about is somebody who has said to me many times, I just, oh gosh, I wish I could do self-care the way that you do. I wish that, but I've got so much to do. Well, the reason she's got so much to do is because she has taken on board everybody's role and must do it herself because nobody else can do it. That is part of the issue. And that's simply her stickler sticking its neck out and getting
Mhm.
in the way of her really being more resourceful and looking for and accepting, one, the help, two, understanding that there are some things that may need to be done absolutely to an incredibly high standard, and there are other things that don't, and being able to differentiate between the two, because we do know there are some things, of course, that are critical, that need that attention to detail, that need to be just so. Brilliant, fantastic. That does not apply to every single thing that needs to be done. So being able to even pull those two things apart, what needs it and what doesn't, already gives us some sense of relief.
The thing is to give yourself the space and grace to do that, because not everybody allows for that, because like when you are so entangled in that scenario in your head that I have to do it because nobody else can do it as good as I, or nobody will give me the answer, so I have to find every single answer under the sun myself, and then show up.
Yes.
You don't give yourself that space. It is important to, I don't know, like with the other saboteurs, we have that sense of like, okay, it is good to be in control, for example, for the controller, but it is bad if you are overplaying it. When it comes to the stickler, I'm not 100% sure as to what is good. Potentially, when you are dealing with something very technical or very, that things are like a life or death or something like that, I think then it is a great attribute to be a
Yeah.
stickler, because you will save lives like this. Okay,
Absolutely.
but
So let's just have a look. Let's have a look at some of the underlying strengths, because as with all the saboteurs, it does have underlying strengths. So when it is not being overplayed, when it is not doing the takeover bid, which is what most saboteurs do. So let's just put most, if not all, the saboteurs do. It's all about high ideals and standards. Again, that can be incredibly appropriate depending on the situation and what needs to be done. They are usually principled. They're able to bring organization and order with little ambiguity and chaos. Fantastic when that is
actually
what is
needed.
required, right? They are incredibly capable of leading themselves and others to live and work based on really clear guiding principles. So there are fundamentally some brilliant things that come with this. These are the underlying strengths that get completely blurred and overrun by the pressure of having to show up being perfect at every single opportunity. And actually, if you think about that, if that is what is going on with you, if that's the conversation you're having, imagine that frustration that you must go through on a daily basis, and the disappointment every time something doesn't go according to plan. That's where sleepless nights come in. That's where high stress comes in. I can think of at least one of the two people I mentioned who have probably bordered on depression because of that constant pressure she was putting herself under. And that's not living. That's not thriving. There's no joy. There's nothing to cling on to make you feel that you are enough, that you have enough, that what you know is enough. It's because it's never enough. That's the thing with the stickler. It's never enough. You may know the encyclopedias backwards and forwards and insides out, but your stickler will tell you that's not enough. You
Yeah.
need to know, right?
No, absolutely. And I think you really nailed it when it comes to, you know like being completely responsible for being stressed out. I think this is 100% the case, because when nothing is enough, then there is no hope, right? And when hope dies, God help us. So this is the whole point, is like create a space so you can say, okay, I can keep my stickler to the extent that it brings all those brilliant things, as you
Yes.
mentioned, Yvonne, but not to the extent that completely debilitates me from moving forward, from doing the things that I want to do, from, like showing up and helping others at the end of the day.
Yes.
If even if I'm not completely perfect, or if I don't know everything. Um,
Yes.
and I would invite anyone, that is a stickler, to try it out. You don't have to do it like all the time. If you feel that this doesn't feel natural, or it's like, oh my God, how am I going to let go? Try it with something that is in your mind is not really life and death, and see how it feels, how it, that burden, how it lifts, and if that serves you, and see what that means for you. And
Yeah.
of course, like as you say, like self-care, I think is very important in this respect. So use that yourself as
Yeah.
the how do you call it, the experiment, in a way, so nobody
Yes.
else will have
The
to know.
testing ground. Explore and test. It's
So,
interesting because here's the thing: the stickler will cause rigidity, and it reduces flexibility. You're no longer flexible because everything has to be just so. Um, so when you are that inflexible, it makes it really difficult for other people to be in your space. Because, like, so for example, Evie and I have already sat here, this is not high on our list. So, like, for me, the stickler, if I had to work with somebody who had a high stickler playing out, that would feel incredibly uncomfortable for me, because I just it's not my space, right? It would feel really uncomfortable. And so this is interesting, because this is when we get to see the rub of relationships, how and why some
absolutely.
things are really difficult, because that saboteur is like in overdrive, and everyone else is going, oh, whoa, what is going on here, and stepping back. And that inflexibility is a real push away. It really is something that is a turn off for people who don't operate in that space or in that way. And so really what we want to see is the stickler to be dialed down, so that inflexibility goes away, but the strengths, the things that we can all benefit from, dial up, and we get that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I mean, throughout the different saboteurs that we have explored here, but also that there still are, I don't know if there is any of them that really can blend well with the stickler. I don't even think that two sticklers can blend well together, to be honest with you. Because that is, like, of course, every person shows up in a different way, and you could
Yes.
be a stickler in certain areas of your life and not others. Um, but this type of rigidity creates very difficult relations.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that you're absolutely right, Yvonne.
And
Um,
it creates difficulty both in personal and professional relationships,
oh
because if
yeah,
you're that rigid and inflexible, imagine you're in a relationship with somebody, and nothing they say or do is ever going to be right, because it's not what you have decided is right. That level of inflexibility can crush relationships, be that friendships, or or an intimate relationship. So it's so important to be able to see that, but be able to see it, be able to look at it without beating yourself up, because there is no win in going down that route either. It's about just being able to see it and understand, wow, that's how I've been operating. And now I am going to give myself permission. And this was interesting, Eva, you said, to embrace a bit of imperfection and find something that you can put that imperfection into. And I worked with somebody, in fact, last year, and we she was perfect. She was absolutely, Stickler was way up there, and she was very, and she knew it. She recognized it in herself. She said it was like, well, my mother was, and and therefore she had already set a bar for me. So if I could not go below the bar, so she embodied everything that the Stickler was. It was almost like handed to her from her mother, and everything that she did, if it wasn't brilliant, then don't you dare show anybody, don't you dare put it out in public, don't you dare talk about it, was pretty much the message that she got wrapped around that from her mother. So a lot of pressure came with that. And so but she was also a creative. She was somebody who loved art. So I said, okay, this is her first task to go away and do: buy a canvas, get your paints out, and I want you to paint without thinking what you're going to paint, because that was something she had never done. Right? It was just like everything had to be planned, drawn out, and before she would put paint on paper. I said, this is not about you don't have to show this to anybody. This is just for you to say, okay, I just need to get comfortable with not being so planned out, so rigid and inflexible, so that I know I can step out of this when I don't need to be in it. And she did. It took her a little bit longer than she had anticipated. It took a bit longer than we had planned, but she got the canvas, and she said, in fact, she got the canvas, and for the longest time, she just looked at the canvas and thought, I don't even know what I'm doing because I haven't got a plan for it. that was just her having to identify how planned out everything had been before and how strategic she was about every single thing, even her painting, which is creative, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it took her a good few weeks to get her head around being able to put paint on this canvas without having to overthink it, over plan it, know what it was going to be. And she eventually did it. She said it was one of the most uncomfortable things she'd ever done. She said which I got, internally it felt messy internally because she was not marking this thing out. However, having done it, it was not that, well, now I can just be imperfect in everything I do and I'm cool with that. But it was, I can release myself from some of that everything has to be perfect, because clearly everything doesn't have to be perfect. What am I doing it for? And the thing that I'm doing it for will dictate how much effort I really need to put into it, how perfect it really does need to be. Or and a high standard may not be perfect. It's just a high standard, and that I can do, and that's okay. So it's really it's interesting to see it played out.
Absolutely. And I mean, as you were talking, I got I remembered a conversation I had with a classmate of mine from elementary school. Imagine now how young we were. And we were like, in our 30s, and we actually walked outside our old school. And I said, oh, how lovely. We're outside school, I have so many lovely memories from here. It's like, don't even remind me. I don't want to know about this school. I mean, to me, that didn't make any sense, because she was the most popular girl, the nicest looking, the best student. She was like everything, And to me, that reaction didn't make any sense. But like after doing the work that we have done, I realized the pressure she was under to actually overperform on anything and everything. She said to me, don't you remember how they were pushing us to be the best and stuff? Like, no, I don't. Because, it didn't really make any, it didn't have any impact on me because I don't operate like this. So that wouldn't be the one thing I remember. I remember, playing in the yard, and I remember having a lot of friends, and I remember, like stuff like that you do when you're in elementary school, not the pressure.
Yeah,
So
but that's
it does,
interesting.
yeah, it does steal the joy. That's the thing.
Of
And
course.
it doesn't matter at which age you are, it seems, it does steal the joy. And if you connect your memories with this type of pressure, then it really, it's not just only about the past, it's about the present and how things are happening in the present for you. So yeah,
Yeah, and
I
that's so
really,
it's really sad, isn't it? That feels like, that feels really sad. However, much as I was saying about as my client, is that there was probably pressure, and I'm not saying it was she was having pressure at home, but she could have been having, we expect conversations,
oh,
we expect to
definitely,
be
that was the case as well, of course.
yeah. So,
Of course.
all of that messaging embodied, now it's like in your body, and everything has to be just so. And therefore, when it's not, it's an issue. And and this is the thing with any of the saboteurs, this is what we do. We take these things, we embody them. They are not who we are, but they become part of how we think, feel, and behave. And that's what people see. That's what people get of us or from us. And so for me, being able to kind of acknowledge it, for me, is like first and foremost being able to say, oh my goodness, I hear what you're saying, and I can literally feel that in my body, because that's exactly how I've been operating. That's exactly what's been going on for me. Being able to do that though without judging, because the minute you then start judging it, you'll fall into the, you're not good enough, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy. All of that other stuff will start to play out, because we have to remember that each of these saboteurs will at some point be holding hands with the judge, and then they'll create another layer of another story, that kind of holds you back and keeps you small. So it's important to be able to look at these qualities and look at these behaviors that do not serve, and be able to say, I just need to be able to see them. Because when we have the awareness, that's when we can do something about it. We can address it. Awareness must come first. So if somebody's telling you that you're a stickler, but you're not seeing it, you're not feeling it, you're not aware, it's very difficult to do something about it, because you're like, no, that's not who I
True.
am, that's not how I show up. And lots of people do, which is again why the assessment is such a brilliant tool. Because I'm going to say the assessment don't lie. The assessment doesn't lie. There will be things on there that may not resonate completely with you, but there will probably be some of the things that do. And if you look at the things that do, then you can really start to say, okay, I can see what parts of that have definitely been showing up in me and the way that I have been living. And what do I want to do about it? Because, awareness, great. And then what? What happens next?
No, but that's the thing. I mean, we always say, for anyone in these discussions, take it with, like with curiosity. Go in it with curiosity. Don't go there judging and say, oh, it's not me, or it's me, or oh my God, what's going on, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, when you create awareness and you do something about it, because as we have said before, you can be aware and do absolutely nothing about it. But when you're starting to do something about it, but in a sage way, in a loving way, in a curious way, in an empathetic way, then things change, and it doesn't have to be really hard, because all of us, to get out of our own way and to lead our saboteurs behind the curtain, we have to do certain things, and
Yeah,
we have to like do work, and the saboteurs stick their heads out every so often, no matter how much work you do. So you
indeed.
know it's like, be empathetic, and really be empathetic towards yourself, more than anything, because that's the
Yes.
hardest bit. I think we can be very empathetic towards others, but when it comes to our own selves, we are like so much more in expectation of the perfect, of the best, of the whatever, you know. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I think
Yeah, so
is
true.
the
But what I think, again, because we've been focusing and looking at these different saboteurs, and we've been using the "I am not enough," because what we're really trying to do is show that whatever saboteurs you have at play, the "I am not enough" is coming up in very, very different ways. It shows up very differently in the stickler than it does in the restless, than it does in the controller. But the message underneath is the same: I'm not enough. I'm not
yeah,
enough. You're experiencing it in a different way, but the message remains the same. So by being able to, one, this is a message that I have been giving myself. Two, now I know what has been driving that message. Three, I can do something about it. And understanding that you absolutely can do something about it. This is very much the work that we have been doing together. This is very much about the work that we've been doing on ourselves, because I'm a great believer in, if I'm going to uh, learn, explore, and experiment with anything, I am going to be number one person who gets to go through the experience and do the exploring and get
absolutely.
curious with, before I will, kind of bring other people in to experience it. And this work is critical, because when we deep dive in these saboteurs, when we start understanding them, and there's so much more than what we're sharing here, that you kind of getting like snippets and stories, um, it can completely change the way that our life feels. I mean, prior to doing this work, I would have said, I'm joyful, I'm happy, I'm good, my world is well. However, having confronted or faced, I want to say not confronted because it's not been a battle, faced my saboteurs, I've been able to up that level of joy and that level of feeling grounded and really living my life. It has absolutely changed. Um, Whether I felt I needed it or not is by the by. It has, and of course that's a benefit. That's a benefit for me, and it's also for a benefit for the people who are around me, because everybody's impacted, right?
That's the thing. Oh, you actually, said it there. And for all of us that we want to do things for others, well, that work is imperative, because how we show up for ourselves changes the way we show up for others as well. And you're absolutely right, Yvonne. We, you know, I think most of us don't necessarily come into this work saying, I want to change. Because, but the change comes naturally, because you are so much more aware. And, even the good things, you enhance them with this type of work. The good characteristics that you have, the things that make you light up, and you don't just, I mean, they don't show up just naturally because they are part of your, your demeanor, your way. Like for you, Yvonne, you are a joyous person. You are a happy person. Light up rooms, and it's natural, and it comes, from inside. But I mean, now it can be even more intentional, and so that can magnify,
Yes.
the way that you show up, the way that you impact people and stuff. So that happens to all of us with our superpowers. And
Indeed.
that's
Indeed.
that's the great work that we do.
Yeah. And if we think about, every saboteur underneath the destructive behaviors, there are strengths. If we just remember that, it's just that that's what we want to do. We want to remove the destructive stuff, because it's getting in our way and it's keeping us
Mhm.
smalling, and it's giving us messages about ourselves that are not true. I am not enough is not true for anybody. um, and really hone those strengths, because that's how we radiate whatever our strengths are. We then get to radiate them. It's just like another level, and you literally can feel it in your body. And I'm sure ever you have, as you've been doing this work too, as you've kind of unpacked what was underneath the controller, for exactly the strengths
Oh,
underneath, that you
absolutely.
start to feel like, wow, this other level of strength, because all the good stuff is like surfacing, coming up to the top, right?
Yeah,
And that's
definitely. And
yeah,
because I mean, we have said every single saboteur has very good things at behind as well.
yes,
So if we can
yes,
shed light on those and put, like in the back burner the other ones that we don't necessarily serve us, then we can really elevate our game, because it's not somebody else, it's us. It has always been us. It's
yes,
just like now we know we can do it. That's it.
yes, yes. The brilliance is there in each and every one of us. And by releasing, by recognizing and then releasing the grip of the saboteurs, we are able to allow the strength and the power, the innate powers that we have, to kind of like rise to the top. And just as I said that, I just pictured a glass of Guinness, with the white head. I don't know why that came into my head, but anyway. But the goodness rises to the top. That's what this is all about. And so if today you've listened to this and you've thought, yeah, I definitely see or feel some of that stickler stuff in me, no, it's okay. This is not a moment to beat yourself up. This is purely a moment to be able to say, I see it, and now I want to understand how what are the things I can do to dial it down. And there are steps that you can take to do that. And you can reach out to either Evie or myself to find out more. At the end of this, as we start to wind down, there's a little QR code for you to go do the assessment. For me, like, most important thing of all. And then if you've got any questions, you can reach out to us. And so that's where I'm going to stop today. Evie, anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered everything as always nicely. Thank you, Yvonne, for your time. Thank you, everybody, for seeing us or watching this live or on a replay. And yes, go do the assessment. And we're here
Yeah,
to answer any questions at any point. Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you, Evie.
Thank you, Yvonne.